Today, I want to talk to you about this confusion that has been created around the subject of remote foreign work experience. This has become a very hot subject now that we've been talking about how you can gain additional points for foreign work experience under the skills transferability while still being in Canada. Let me just talk to you about the eligibility, whether it's accepted, not accepted, how does it work, whether it can even happen for you or whether it can even work for you in your application. To understand remote work, foreign work experience, we must also understand what is Canadian work experience, because this is like a negative inference, right? So if it is not Canadian work experience, it has to be foreign work experience. What is the definition of work? Well, work is any activity for usually what you would be paid. Of course, it can also be unpaid, and this is usually a job that a Canadian citizen, a permanent resident would do to earn some wages, to earn some money. This is just a broad definition of work in terms of Canadian immigration. Now, if you are performing this activity, this work, paid, unpaid, that is a different aspect, but in terms of eligibility for Canadian immigration, it has to be paid employment, paid work. So if you're performing this work in Canada for a Canadian entity in the Canadian labor market, where any Canadian permanent resident or citizen could also do this job, you're being paid by a Canadian entity, you are working under the authorization to work. Well, this is all Canadian work experience. Of course, if it is under tier category 0, 1, 2, 3, paid, if it has to be eligible in express entry and most PNP programs. So therefore, by negative inference, it would mean that any work experience which is not in Canada, which is not in the Canadian labor market, for which any Canadian permanent resident or citizen may not be able to work, and therefore that should be foreign work experience, right? Foreign experience has also been defined under the ministerial instructions under section 25. And it says very, very clearly over here that it is foreign work experience is acquired by a foreign national outside Canada in one or more occupations listed in tier category 0, 1, 2, 3 of National Occupation Classification, which is your NOC code. Now, when we say it is performed, or rather it is gained or acquired by a foreign national outside Canada, you would automatically start thinking that this is for a person to be physically outside Canada. However, the ministerial instructions over here do not say that you should have been physically outside Canada, and that word physical has been omitted. Now, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, but this is where the whole debate comes from. Remote work experience became very common during COVID, right? During COVID, even inside Canada, the Canadian experience also became remote. Foreign work experience obviously became remote in a lot of cases. And post-COVID, that continued. The remote aspect of the work experience continued. Now, for example, if you are visiting Canada, right? You're just visiting your friends, you're visiting your relatives, you're here for 2 or 3 months, but you continue with your job outside Canada. So therefore, by logic, if there is a work experience that you are working for an employer outside Canada, even remotely, should ideally be considered as eligible, should be considered legally and give you those points. However, that was not the case in one situation where one of the Reddit users have posted this on their account, and they're talking about their permanent residency application, which was refused. Now, if you go into the details here of this particular post, and it's on your screens right now. Here the officer states that I'm not satisfied that you meet the requirement under paragraph 25(1) that I just showed you, that because it says, because you have not submitted sufficient evidence to satisfy me that your entire declared foreign work experience was acquired while you were physically outside Canada. Now, here the officer has interpreted the section 25 that I just showed you earlier, where you should have gained the work experience, you should have acquired the work experience while physically outside Canada. This obviously is where the whole debate is coming up. This application, obviously, for a person who had claimed remote work experience, remote foreign work experience, this application was denied. And therefore, that brings us back to the question that can we consider remote foreign work experience as eligible in Canadian immigration application? And for that, let me present to you this excerpt from one of the immigration representative mailbox. Now, immigration representatives have a mailbox where we can send out messages to IRCC requesting for case-specific guidance. This particular screenshot very clearly identifies a response from the immigration IRCC stating very clearly that the policy intent for Canadian work experience requires that the work performed demonstrates to the officer that the applicant has entered the Canadian labor market and a Canadian entity paid the applicant for their work. It also must be evident to the officer that the work would be considered a business activity that is competitive in the Canadian labor market, and that this position would normally have been filled by a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. Entry into the Canadian labor market is also a necessary element of work experience under the Canadian experience class that demonstrate one's ability to become economically established in Canada under Section 87.1 of the Refugee Protection Regulations. Remote work for a foreign employer while residing in Canada may be eligible under the express entry as foreign work experience if it meets all the other requirements. Work outside of Canadian labor market is not eligible for Canadian work experience. This is as simply as they could mention it. And then they also say that the system does not currently capture remote work. Therefore, when an applicant is invited to apply, please submit an explanation detailing the remote work agreement and where the employer and employee are physically located. Of course, the assessment of an application is always based on a case-by-case basis. There you have it. So, would you now consider foreign work experience to be eligible or not if it was remote? This is now becoming a very big debate. In my opinion, of course, work experience, if it is performed outside Canada, of course, it's foreign work experience. But even if it is performed remotely, when I'm saying remotely, I mean if you are in Canada and if you're working for an employer outside Canada, so you're not part of the Canadian labor market, a Canadian permanent resident or a citizen could normally not perform that job while being in Canada. I mean, unless, of course, they want to work remotely, but then they're not interested in Canadian immigration. And therefore, that work experience should be considered eligible under the foreign work experience. Now, the problem happens is when you are not able to present it clearly. We have handled many such applications where we have been able to claim the work experience, remote work experience, and the applications were all approved. Such instances are quite common with big tech firms. They're common with engineering firms. They're common with consulting firms. They're also common with marketing firms. These are main areas where this is quite common. Recently, virtual assistants have also become quite common as an occupation, as a job. This picked up pace again during or after COVID, and this is quite mainstream right now. Why won't you consider this work experience as eligible? Now, I'm sure one of these days, one of these applications that get refused will make its way to the court, to the federal court for judicial review. And I'm sure a judge will be able to establish the jurisprudence on this matter, therefore giving us a very clear pathway for future applications. At this point of time, if you are claiming foreign work experience which is remote, then it becomes your responsibility to present to the officer in very clear terms, how is this a valid work experience? Your documentation, your offer letter, your communication with the employers, ongoing communication. So, of course, if it's remote work experience, there would have been a lot of team meetings or Zoom meetings. There would have been a lot of projects that have been assigned to you, work that has been assigned to you, email communication, email chain. Therefore, your salary that is being paid to you, the pay stubs that is being paid to you, any kind of directive that you've had from your employer, which very clearly indicates that this is remote work experience, all of that will become of extreme critical importance in establishing the eligibility and credibility of your work experience. Further, to support remote work experience, the applicant should be able to establish, as I was telling you earlier, a job offer letter where it says that this work was, or rather is going to be performed in a remote fashion, proof that the work can be completed remotely, proof that you have the background, qualifications, work experience to perform this kind of a job, employment contract, pay slips, any kind of performance reviews, salary record, tax documents, day-to-day work records, your system logins, your work logs, job assignments, emails. All of this will become very critical and important part of your proof to show that this is genuine work experience. And if I was you, and if I would document this very well in a very structured manner and present it to the officer, and in spite of all of this, if the officer still refuses your application, you should have a very good case to challenge this in the federal court under a judicial review. I'm sure any lawyer will be very happy to take this application forward and then challenge IRCC's decision in this manner. The key here is always to satisfy the officer with a very well document established track record proof to show that this work experience is genuine. Of course, you don't want to be facing a judicial review. It's going to be more costly. It's going to be taking more time. You might lose out on further opportunities. And therefore, if you are providing all of this upfront, you shouldn't have a problem. Therefore, I can say that remote work experience is absolutely fine. Of course, one of these applications that have been refused, that has created a lot of panic. I've just showed you another immigration representative mailbox screenshot to explain to you what is Canadian experience, what is foreign work experience, and how foreign work experience, even remote, is absolutely and should be acceptable. Now, to come to the point of a lot of people who have been finger pointing and calling it all a scam. Well, for you guys, you need to understand, if you call foreign work experience scam, why are you calling it a scam now? Why not all this while? Why would you not want to believe that a lot of people do have remote work experience? Even in Canada, there are so many people who are working for Canadian companies as Canadian work experience. They're working remotely. They could be living in Vancouver, but their employment is in Toronto. They could be living in Calgary and their work experience, or rather their employer could be in Montreal. So this is absolutely normal. This is absolutely common. If you are presenting your foreign work experience remote, as long as the work is being delivered, work is being performed, as in you may be in Canada, but the work is the place of work, the work where the services are being delivered is outside Canada, it should be absolutely fine in the terms of foreign work experience. And as far as scams or calling things scams are concerned, well, that is IRCC's bucket of responsibility. It's up to them to enforce, and it's up to them to verify and validate all these work experience. Of course, that's what they should be doing. And anybody who is trying to provide fraudulent documents or scam the system, well, they should also be aware that IRCC now has become extremely diligent. This is version 3.0 of IRCC, where they are checking everything. They are calling employers, they're calling the applicant and the employer at the same time, cross-verifying their job duties, cross-verifying their period of employment and what kind of role, where they were working, how they were working remotely. All of this is being verified. And for people who are really doing all those kind of things, which are all hanky-panky, well, they will obviously get into trouble, and cases of misrepresentation are coming forward. They are making their way to the federal court, and they are being thrown out of the court by the judge, saying that yes, that was really misrepresentation. So if you're doing any other hanky-panky activities, I would tell you it's not worth it. You will eventually get caught. And even if you become a permanent resident and even become a citizen for that matter, at any point of time, if it is established that you got all the way there by misrepresenting during your immigration journey, well, I have bad news for you. The conclusion here is that remote work experience continues to be a gray area, as is evident by today's examples. And therefore, if you are looking to indeed gain advantage from this remote foreign work experience, you should bear in mind the complexities involved and the risk involved, and understand that this lies in a gray area, and of course IRCC's discretion will involve on a case-to-case basis. But for the rest of you, if your work experience is fine, if you have credible documents, if you have everything intact, if you have everything in order, I don't think you should have a problem claiming this work experience as remote foreign work experience and getting those very valuable 38 to 50 points. Thank you for watching the video, and if you're still here, give us a like, share this with other colleagues of yours or your friends who might also be looking for clarity on remote foreign work experience. And while you're here, hit the subscribe button. We would like to see those numbers going up.